Right, evening everybody. Evening. And welcome to this early start of Cabinet, which was postponed last week due to the inclement weather that we suffered. So thank you all for making the effort for being here this evening. We've got a busy agenda and we have to be done relatively early because there's a seminar on devolution to follow. If I start with the webcasting announcement, I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewing, with copies of the recording being made available to those that request it. By being present at this meeting, it is likely that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in your image becoming part of the broadcast. You should be aware that this may infringe your human and data protection rights. If you have any concerns, please speak to the webcasting officer. Now, members, I don't need to remind you, when you're speaking, turn your microphone on, and when you've finished, turn your microphone off. Okay, moving on. Apologies for absence.
Just apologies from Councillor Williamson, Chairman.
Thank you, and I think I've got apologies for lateness from Councillor Patel. Okay. Declarations of interest, if there are any. No. Okay. Minutes for last meeting, can I take those as being agreed? Agreed. Reports of portfolio holders. Councillor Holly Whitbread.
This isn't my portfolio, but since Councillor Patel isn't here, just a big congratulations to Diane Butler, who won an award from Jack Petchey in recognition of her work over many years, dating back to when I was a youth councillor. She does brilliant work, bringing in a lot of grant funding for the Youth Council, as well as managing a really successful team of young people. So just a big congratulations to Di Butler. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations after many years of hard work for our Youth Council as well. I think that should be echoed across the chamber. I'm sure you'll mention it later as well. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll say a little bit more about this in our later meeting this evening, but I just want to announce that Epping Forest District Council has been awarded £1 million from the UK Government as part of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. There's a bit of a rush on now to get our first year spent before the end of March. The Shared Prosperity Fund, though, is one of those good ones which we can actually take some of the money to actually administer the projects that we're going to run. There is no update to the rural prosperity so far.
Okay, thank you. That's a good piece of news. Councillor Lyon.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me if I feel a bit jet-lagged at the moment. So.
Robin, you've been in the sunshine while we've been
I have.
in the cold.
Sorry about that. I didn't really want to announce it, but yes, I have been. Just to add to my report a little bit more about what's been going on with a new chat bot that has been introduced, which has been particularly helpful for our waste management teams because it's taken some of the pressure off the call centre, and there's been some very significant impact and helpfulness that's been generated through the introduction of this particular facility. It's been offered free of charge to Epping Forest, and it's looking very promising for waste management and other parts of the council.
I'm sure you brought a smile to the face of Councillor Phillip because it's free of charge. Wonderful. Councillor Bedford.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just to bring everybody up to speed regarding the local plan. I was just informed on Friday afternoon that all the documentation has been uploaded to the portal for the inspector, and we are now moving forward to the next stage where we just have to wait now for the inspector to come back to us as he's reviewing the main modifications and all the paperwork that people have responded to, which has all been sent in. Another piece of good news, which I'll keep really for the full council so that every member is aware, I'll pass that on later. I'll hold that one back, but it's another piece of good news.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Bedford. Going forward, any public questions or requests to address the Cabinet?
None, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, item 7, report of overview and scrutiny. Councillor Kane.
Thank you, Leader. I'll refer to our meeting on the 17th of November, where the committee undertook detailed scrutiny of the corporate performance reporting for Q2 on the project status summary, key milestones and RIG status for those projects identified as a priority project within the portfolio. Members' questions encompassed many of the projects, but especially on the waste contract. Miscollections were causing many residents to contact customer services, and this was impacting on customer services meeting its key performance indicator targets on customer satisfaction. And reflecting on the 3rd of November meeting, I noticed that the members had concerns about the transfer of services to Qualis, so we are having the Qualis Group Managing Director Mrs. Jevons to come and talk to us a little bit more and sort out, any questions, give answers to any questions the members have.
Super. Thank you very much. Members, are you happy to note the report of overview and scrutiny?
Noted.
Thank you very much. So moving forward, item 8, new support model, sheltered housing. Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'm really happy to bring forward this report. It's a much more modern look at what we then called sheltered housing, but moving forward, hopefully, with agreement from council, we'll call independent living. So we're presenting a report here which puts forward a more flexible and modern approach to independent living, which gives residents the flexibility which they require. Members will know that sheltered housing goes from 60 to 90 plus. So a 60-year-old, many fellow members of the council might be in that age bracket, obviously has very different needs to someone in their 90s, which this report very much recognises. What needs to be emphasised is the service that we offered through sheltered accommodation is very different to adult social care, but it can range from knocks on doors to telephone calls to check residents are okay. You'll see in the recommendation that there is a slight increase of 7.4% in the charge for this service from April 2023, which means that this more modern approach can be brought forward. Our staff will also, as well as changing their title to independent living officers, will work from a hub to ensure that the work is spread evenly across our various different independent living units across the district. So I'm happy to bring forward this report and take any questions, and I hope members have also had an opportunity to read it. Thank you, Chairman.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Members, any questions? No? Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. It's not a question, it's more a statement backing up my colleague. I'm perfectly happy that we go for a 7.4% rise here rather than 7% because, amongst other things, it's essential that we cover our costs for what we're doing. This is not a rent aspect, which is where the 7% cap arise, but it is necessary to make sure that we cover all the costs associated with doing this. So, and given the implications, even for the sheltered housing residents, is only 5p a week, I think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Hollywood.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Phillip, for those comments. And just to add to that, the reason this is an uncapped figure, and the reason we have gone for this is because there are other pressures on our council tenants in terms of rent, and also with independent living, specifically the regeneration of units across the district. So that's why we've chosen this figure to cover our costs, but be fair on our tenants as well. And actually, what I would say, and I probably should have said in my report earlier, is we want to make independent living much more appealing to people, and that's part of the reason why we have had that wider regeneration. But independent living is something that people should want to move to, so this is all part of that package for the future.
Super, thank you very much. Councillor Lyon.
Thank you, Chairman. I welcome this report. It's a very useful report. It does bring the sheltered housing or independent living up to current standards. The only thing I would like to add, and I have raised this separately from the meeting, is that we do need to include a broadband strategy built into this particular part of the scheme for our own officers and also for use of residents, particularly Highmead House.
Thank you. Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Thank you, Councillor Lyon, and I know we've had good conversations about this offline. And I agree that broadband provision across our shelter schemes in the shared spaces is something that's really important for our officers, but also for the residents. There is a bit of a challenge in increasing appetite to cover the cost, but I think we're trying to find a new way forward. And I would also thank Councillor Lyon, because we have included digital technology, and bearing in mind the changes in digital technology within this recommendation, that means the offer to those in independent living will be constantly changing based on new technologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With no other members indicating to speak, can I agree those recommendations? Agreed. Thank you. We then move on to item 9, the review of housing strategy to 23 to 27. Councillor Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. And this is actually the one strategy of the 4 that I've brought forward over recent months that isn't statutory, but a lot of what is contained in it is very important. This housing strategy really outlines our ambition for council and social housing for the years to come, the next decade to come. We make it very clear in this strategy, and I would offer an apology that you will see that it is a draft strategy with some slight tinkering to do around numbers from the census, and also my own introduction as well, which I will ensure that members have sight of via the member briefing. But in this strategy, we really set out our ambition, our continued ambition to increase supply of council housing across Epping Forest District. What members will see within time is a slight shift in that strategy to meet the challenges of the economy now, so looking at larger sites and larger developments rather than some of those smaller garage sites which perhaps were not always cost efficient or indeed as quick as they should have been in delivery. We're also really focused on quality, safety and high standards across our estates. And this comes off the back of a lot of the reports around Grenfell, making sure we're meeting the standards which are expected, and that the homes that we're providing to local people are of the highest possible standard. And linked into that is health, safety and well-being, but also within that is the health and well-being agenda, making sure that our estates and council properties promote good health and healthy living. And actually linked to that is also the community safety aspect. You can see with our Safer Streets project in Ninefield some of the work we're doing around that, from new playgrounds to lighter streets. Also referenced in this strategy is economic growth, the importance of supporting residents during the cost of living crisis. And I think energy is something to highlight here, and we're doing numerous projects around insulation and energy efficiency, and also protecting the environment and the state of our estates as they are. Looking at this strategy, it has shifted whilst it's gone through the kind of scrutiny process over the last year, looking at almost a more back to basics approach, making sure that we're delivering the basics of clean streets, tidy streets, light streets well across our estates. So I'm sure members have had an opportunity to read that report, and I hope they can agree the recommendations within it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. I note in the resource implications, it says that any additional burdens will be being addressed by the interim director. I think it's important to just highlight that if this does involve a change to the HRA business plan, we need to bring that back in terms of budget implications, where it can be constrained within existing budgets. I think this is a very positive thing. I would, on the strategy itself, I would just stress things with like economic development have to be targeted at more than just our housing residents. And I know our economic development department is working hard on economic development as it is.
Councillor Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. And as the report outlines, costs are contained, but Councillor Phillip will know we are reviewing our HRA business plan just to deal with the realities of the economy we currently have with high interest rates. in terms of borrowing and the cost of building, which has indeed gone up. So that's something we're keeping a watch on, and as outlined in my report, looking at larger sites which tend to be more cost effective and quicker to deliver. I note his comments around economic development. This also links into our community work and work with partners, which is also at the heart of this, and making sure we refer people to the right places, particularly in terms of kind of job support, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from inside the chamber? In that case, I'll go to Councillor Wixley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. My question, I'm not sure if it's actually covered in the report, but it concerns priority number 3, which is on page 46 of the agenda and page 14 of the draft report. Yeah, my query, because I've been approached by this a couple of times, is regarding housing adaptations for people who have disabilities and they require alterations to their house. And I understand we work in conjunction with an officer from Essex County Council on this. And I just wonder if that should be included in this draft strategy. So I was thinking perhaps of an extra bullet point on page 46, which would cover that. But perhaps the portfolio could advise me on this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wixley. Councillor Holly-Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. And actually, I think that's probably a good point to include. And perhaps we could add to the recommendations a bullet point around this. As Councillor Wixley quite rightly states, we actually received this funding from Essex County Council. We have a slight extra budget around it, and I don't have the details in front of me, but I know we increased our budget around disability adaptations during the pandemic to make sure that our accommodation was fit for purpose and that we could get through what was a little bit of a backlog historically. But I'm certainly happy to put an appropriate line in on that, and I'm sure Cabinet would be happy to delegate authority to me on that. Thank you.
Okay, we'll put that as an amendment. Any other members? Okay, well, you've got recommendations before you with the additional amendment that's just been mentioned, with authority given to the Cabinet member to make the necessary alterations. Can we take those recommendations as agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We then move on to item 10, which is the outsourcing of the concierge service. Councillor Sam Kane.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, the concierge service that we have here, this is a proposal to actually outsource that service. Historically, we've had some difficulty keeping staffing levels. We currently have 4 full-time employees to cover the shifts required, and we're looking to outsource. We had expressions of interest from 4 contractors, but only one followed through with a full bid. That was PCS Group, and they scored very highly on the evaluation process, so I'm more than happy to propose PCS Group as the people we outsource to. There's a number of advantages to doing through the outsource. It increases resilience, and it also makes sure we've got SIA security trained concierge on site at all times. So I would ask my colleagues to concur with the recommendations at the top of the report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kane. Members. Councillor Rose Brooks, in that case.
I know when this came to committee, I didn't feel I got a terribly satisfactory answer about why we only actually got 1 bid when we'd sort of offered it out to 4. Why was it so? Why did they decide they didn't want it?
Councillor Kane.
I'll refer to officer support for this because I'm not too sure of the actual detail.
Thank you. So we didn't get a huge amount of feedback, to be honest, from the contractors that didn't bid, but reading between the lines, it's not what they do as a day job, so that we work with them at the moment. So we had the ex-jobs, which are ex-police officers that provide security to maybe meetings that there could be some issues for kind of like public and member safety. So the concierge piece isn't what they do day to day as their job. We then had Manpower, who provide the overnight security service, but again, they're just security officers. Concierge isn't what they do day to day. and then Total Security Services, who we thought would be interested because they do cover the concierge role at the moment, but again, it's more security facing rather than the customer piece that we need. So yeah, as I say, we didn't get a huge amount of feedback, but reading between the lines, that's what we suspect.
Councillor Brooks.
And are they going to cover the reception area as well as, you know, the little room and being there 24 hours?
That is something that we put into the initial business case, but then having internal conversations, we decided that from a financial perspective, it wouldn't be feasible at this stage. So we thought if we outsource the concierge piece first, see how that goes and keep it under review year by year, but it's something that we could do for sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I just, not surprisingly, looking at the finance side of things, I think the important part here is the fact that for years 2 and 3, as far as the council is concerned, is that no growth has been factored in salaries, and as members will hear later, that is one of our major challenges going forwards. So I think given that the gap between year 1 of 216,000 and year 3 in the outsourced at 223, that will be more than subsumed with cost of living rises over the next 2 years. So although at this point in time it looks as if year 3 is more expensive, in actuality it will not be, and therefore this is actually a good way to save the council money on doing something that's not their core service, and therefore I'm fully in support.
Thank you very much. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. I hadn't intended speaking on this until I heard some more information, because I had followed this when it went to the Select Committee by reading the agenda. I wasn't at the meeting, but I had read the agenda. But maybe I'm interpreting what the officer said unfairly, but I heard what I heard, and it seems to me that we've only got one tender because we really only approached one company that was likely to tender for it. The other 3 didn't seem to be, from what I've just heard, didn't seem to be companies that would be interested in concierge tendering. So it's not altogether surprising that we only got one tender. I'm not necessarily saying I'm against it, but I think I would probably have been happier if we went to at least another one at the time, not now, 1 or 2 other companies that were in this line of business. Maybe I've misinterpreted what I've heard, but I don't think I have.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. I will get that clarified for you, but we went to 4 companies who provide that type of service. This just wasn't what, and we're seeing this more and more often, I'm afraid, at the moment, where companies just back away from tenders. It sounds like a strange thing to say, but it's a really challenging time out there, and that tends to be the case. Councillor Kane.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that comment, Leader, that the 4 companies approached all provide part of the services that we consider, that we call the concierge service, and they all have a component, and in many cases a major component of those services as part of their package. But when they look at what we're asking for and the varied range of services that we're actually looking for, that's the point when they backed away, with the exception of PCS, who came through with the bid.
Oh, that's fine, Chairman, thank you.
Yeah, I think what Councillor Murray is searching for, and I believe that we can give him confidence, is that we went to the open market, and the open market came back with the one full tender. Okay, so I think that's the clarity on it. Members, you've got before you the recommendations. Can I take those as agreed? Agreed. Brilliant. Okay, then we go to item 11, introduction of charging for additional stroke replacement waste containers. Councillor Avey.
Thank you, Leader. After a review of some aspects of the waste contract, I'm making the following proposals set out in the briefing paper, which I'll summarise. Residents will be charged if they require an additional garden waste bin, in addition to the one they already have, provided free of charge. Residents will be charged for larger refuse waste bins, and in the event that a resident has lost or cannot produce their old or damaged bin, the replacement cost will be down to the resident. Where a bin is broken we offer a free repair service at no charge. I hope you will support these recommendations, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. A very sensible paper. Any questions? Councillor Phillip?
Chairman, can I welcome the fact that this can reduce the pressure on the waste contract prices. I do have a small concern that we need to treat lost bins carefully if that loss happens at the time where collections are taking place. It's not unknown for bins not to go back where they were left outside a property following the collection of both the recycling containers, and for those of us who now actually have 3 bins, it's a significant one. And I don't know whether for this one we need to make a note that the larger bins are particularly for the waste disposal and not the potential use of the blue lidded bins. But I think we need to be careful if a resident reports after a collection round that their bin can no longer be found, we need to have some discretion to treat that sensibly.
Thank you very much, Councillor Phillip. Councillor Lyon.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I fully support the comments by Councillor Phillip, but particularly damage caused by the waste contractors when they're collecting bins. My current bin is damaged. It's still serviceable, so it's not an issue. But I wouldn't expect to be charged if the bin is caused damage by the contractor. And again, how do we actually manage that facility to ensure that we don't charge residents unnecessarily?
Councillor Avey, I'm sure this is just where common sense is going to be applied.
Indeed, and these are pragmatic considerations we've given to the charging, and I think officers will be tasked to use some discretion when they're dealing with lost or damaged bins. I think in the experience of damaged bins, most of them can be repaired, quite frankly, where tops have come off, which may be due to handling by the operative, maybe. But I think obviously officers will be tasked with being careful in the way we deal with this particular issue to avoid obviously upsetting residents where that wouldn't normally be the case.
Thank you very much. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. This is something I intended to speak on, and I'm glad that Councillor Lyon and Councillor Phillip have made the points they have, because I had that on my radar. The only occasions within my ward where I have known, and I'm sure it's happened elsewhere, but that I'm aware of, was when things have got lost, have been following a collection. You know, the resident puts it out the night before and they come to put it back the next day and it's no longer there, and it's got absolutely nothing to do with them. Just one other scenario which I've come across a number of times is when someone moves into a property and the previous resident probably has decided to take bins with them. Does a new resident moving into the property automatically get a new bin, or do we say that the bin goes with the property, and if they've bought a property, or perhaps even with renters, more like, and they've rented a property and it doesn't have a bin, it's their, you know, they should have foreseen that, and then we're going to charge them. What's our policy in that situation? Because it's occurred a number of times in my ward, so I'm sure it happens throughout the district.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Avey, I'm sure pragmatism is going to be the name of the day, isn't it?
Yeah, back to my previous comment, I think looking at the officers behind me, clearly the minutiae of applying this process, we'll get to grips with it and act in a reasonable manner.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor John Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, I was going to raise that point. I mean, I think if it's going to operate the way Councillor Avey said it's going to operate, you know, that commitment should be reflected in amending the recommendations, because at the moment, you know, they are very black and white. You know, they say the replacement cost should be down to the resident. So I'd like to see that caveated in the recommendations. The other question I was going to ask about was I wondered if the portfolio holder was entirely happy with the equality impact assessment, because it seems to me there are circumstances where particular households, might generate extra waste due to the characteristics. And people with disabilities, for example, it's not all medical waste. Typically, they may receive things or more home-delivered things, or have more things in packaging and so forth that requires disposal of. And maternity, indeed paternity, obviously you've got nappies, which can be, a larger, waste than the normal household. And indeed certain communities, typically live in larger households, have larger families, or live in multi-generational households, and that creates potentially a need for a larger bin. And I don't see that reflected in the equality impact assessment or the report, and nor do I see any explanation of what happens where people can't afford, well, indeed any idea of what the charge for a new bin would be, or what will happen for people who can't afford those bins. So a bit of clarity on that would be helpful, Chairman.
Councillor Avey, nappies. Any answer?
Frankly, we're setting the policy here, and I don't want to get dragged into the minutiae of every exemption that may exist. I think from an operational point of view, yes, I would like to suggest officers do have a sufficient amount of discretion in certain cases not to charge for larger refuse bins, though I would think that would be reasonably rare. I think we should give the officers a chance to carry out this broad proposals and not load it with lots of minutiae.
Yeah, thank you very much. Councillor Whitehouse.
I mean, I don't think the equality impact assessment is minutiae. I mean, it's a fundamental part of the process of drawing up reports and evaluating the recommendations. And you can agree or disagree that these are relevant factors, but if you don't set the context to start with, as Councillor said, it's policy, and the minutiae and the operational stuff will be driven by what the policy says. If the policy doesn't take account of these factors, the minutiae won't take account of those factors, surely. Which is why I asked reflected in the recommendations.
Councillor Phillip.
Yeah, I mean, I read, as I usually do, I read the equality impact. I think it's actually balanced when you look at the overall audience that you're looking at. In general, it is true that it is neutral. If you look at disability, yes, there is an assisted service. Yes, you can look at it. There may be some people at certain times, pregnancy, maternity, might lead to a small increase in the amount of waste delivered. On the other hand, if you're taking care of the environment and going for reusable nappies, then there will be no more waste. So I think it is actually fairly balanced. I mean, if we want to go down to the minutiae, I could start talking about whether or not we should actually be looking to see that if we charge not only for the increased refuse bin size, whether we should be looking at an ongoing charge, because somebody with a larger bin will naturally be producing more waste which goes to landfill, and therefore a cost to the council. I don't think that's a step that we want to take yet. It may be something that we need to do further down the line, but I don't think it's something we need to do. I would be happy if we modified 3D slightly to say the officers have discretion to look at exceptions and no more than that, but that would be enough to perhaps answer Councillor Whitehouse's question.
I think it's a case of refining. We've already heard this is going to be a pragmatic policy. There will be an element of refining the fees and charges. Remember, fees and charges are agreed at the annual budget as well, but there'll be an element of pragmatism to this, and I would have thought that between the portfolio holder and officers that those refinements will be agreed, and I think that goes without saying. And as you quite rightly said, there are many councils across the county that actually charge for more than just larger bins. Green waste, for instance, is normally charged by each council now, which Epping Forest hasn't done up to now, and we still offer a very effective system, but of course, as we know, other councils do charge much more for waste collection than what Epping Forest does. Okay, Councillor Wixley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased to hear that discretion and common sense is likely to be used. I think a concern I have, I don't know how much replacement bins cost, but I hope that wouldn't lead to people pinching somebody else's bin. I can see all sorts of problems arising out of that. And I have noticed that the bins have got serial numbers on them, and I don't know if any record of those is kept to say which serial number applies to which property. But perhaps the portfolio holder could give an answer to those queries.
Thank you, Councillor Wixley. I'm sure actually Councillor Avey may wish to pass to officers to see if the bins are actually serial numbered or chipped.
Well, indeed. I suspect they might have a serial number on them. They do. So we could make a record, but if we see any evidence of bin nicking going on, then I'm sure we will deal with the situation when it arises, quite frankly.
And are we aware of what the penalty is for bin nicking?
Colchester introduced £50.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, just to give you a for instance, Colchester charges £50 per year for from October for green waste collection. So I'm not sure who runs Colchester, but I think it's the Liberals, isn't it? Yeah.
I think you'll find Councillor Phillips now already doing the calculation in his head.
No. Okay, so therefore we've got the recommendations before us. We will add the additional recommendation which will say that any refinements of the policy will be agreed with the portfolio holder and the officers. Is that correct? Yeah. Are we happy to agree that?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to item 12, Q2 budget monitoring. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. This way we descend into doom and gloom, probably. This is the budget monitoring for Q2 of this year, taken to the end of September. The good news, well, there isn't any. Well, I suppose we've made it to the end of Q2. That's good news. We are significantly overspending. It looks as if that overspend will continue through the coming year. So we are projecting a net expenditure of just under 16.9 million, which compared to our budget of 15.6 million gives us an overspend of about 1.3 million. One of the biggest impacts on this, as I've said, we seem to be saying for many months now, is our staff budget. We budgeted for a 2% rise in our budget. That's coming out at basically around an average of 5%. If we think about our overall staff budget being towards 30 million, the difference between 2% and 5% is a significant amount of money. The local plan is having an impact not just on our planning department, which are not getting planning applications that they expect, but also in terms of delaying the work that Qualis can do. The overall economic impact on Qualis makes some of the developments less commercially viable at this stage. So we are in a position where our expenditure is going to be over what we expect it to be. This is called out in detail on page 113, where there's net expenditure budget. Turning to the capital budget for the general fund, significantly underspend, and that ties into what I was saying already about Qualis not being able to progress. We don't want Qualis to do development at the expense of anything. We want Qualis there to be making contributions to the council, therefore it needs to be making a positive contribution. If we look at the housing revenue account, it's actually sitting in a little bit of a better position, but they also have not been building as much as we would expect them to build, so their capital budget is behind track as well. There is a lot of detail in this report, and I'm hoping members have gone through it, and if they've got any detailed questions, then I might have to refer those to the officers, but I'm happy to take questions on this, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Members? Okay, no comments? obviously all ready for item 13 in that case. Can we agree and note the report that we've just received and go on to the any other business, item 13, the budget papers? Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. Members will remember that when I came first with the budget to Cabinet, we highlighted a £4.2 million gap between what the amount of money that we needed and the amount of money that we were going to have. I'm pleased to say there's been a lot of work that's gone on in the interim, and a lot of hard work by my Cabinet colleagues and their officers, looking everywhere possible to look for savings and additional revenue. The good news is the budget paper in front of us is a balanced budget. It does involve a contribution from reserves and a small contribution towards our general reserves. From the last report, I highlighted the fact that we were going to be taking from reserves in this year. That will take us below our £4 million minimum budget provision for that. So we need to be putting some money back into that to actually build it back up towards the 4 million. It won't take it the whole way in one go. We've had to make a lot of decisions, and it's probably easy at this point for me to say some of those decisions were really difficult, but those were really difficult. There have been trade-offs between things that we didn't want to do and things that we really didn't want to do and things that we really, really couldn't do. It is unfortunate that not only are we looking to get rid of some vacant posts at this stage, but the likelihood is that taking this budget forward is that a small number of redundancies will be have to take place. We have looked to those areas that we think that we can do it. We've taken the approach that we want to maintain the services that our residents require, but we need to have a balanced budget. I won't make any comment about other councils within the county of Essex having to do letter 114s. We do not want to be in that position. And as long as I'm finance, we're not going to get ourselves in a position that we will make the difficult decisions early enough that we can keep control of our finance. Looking at the bottom line here, we're looking at a balanced budget for next year. We're looking at a council tax rise, the same as we did this year, of £5 on a band D. I would love to be able to not have that impact on my residents, but again, I have to get to a balanced budget. We have made an assumption that we are getting some government grant. We do not know yet exactly how much government grant we're going to get. I suspect this budget will continue to be worked on all the way up until the Budget Council in February. I know Mr. Small is looking forward to having his Christmas dinner looking over the government figures. Well, that's what you get if you're a Section 151 officer. But we will keep changing it. This is the view that we have at this point. That's why it's still a draft budget. I will be taking this to the scrutiny panel with all of my colleagues standing up for their own particular areas if the scrutiny panel wants to dive down into the detail of it. I don't want to go on past this simply to ignore the HRA. The HRA is actually looking not too bad in the short term. The projection for next year is actually a surplus of around about £350,000, but that then gets wiped out over the coming years as they go forward. But the good thing is that that is a balanced position. The detail on the general fund evolution is found on page 8 of the supplementary. There's a number of details about where the income comes from on page 11. There's a whole number of savings proposals, and they're called out in detail on page 15. You can notice the biggest three items, well, two of the biggest items are vacant posts and employees, and we've got supplies and services saving at over 1.1 million. On page 17 in Annex A, there's the subjective analysis, and if you go on further on in Appendix A, you can see much more detailed cost centre level of information, which I know a number of councillors wanted to see beforehand. The details of the draft budget for the housing revenue account are found in Appendix B, which starts on page 25. Appendix C takes us into the draft capital programme. There are no major differences in that at the moment. We can see growth items from this year, in December, have an increased budget demand of 36,000 in 2023 going forward, looking at over the 5-year period of an increased burden of 2.3 million. On page 30, you've got the updated summary, and the capital programme for 23-24 to 27-28 is called out in detail on page 33, with the HRA capital programme on the following page. Chairman, at this point as well, I'm bringing forward proposals to change the fees and charges, which, as you said, we do at the budget setting. You can see the HRA detail on page 36 and the general fund fees and charges starting on page 37. We've taken a simple approach on the fees and charges, looking at where the cost of inflation is and where the cost of providing these services is, and some of these items are actually set under legislation and therefore will sit. We've taken the view at this stage of not significantly changing the car parking tariffs as we did that last year. And finally, in Appendix E, we've got the medium-term financial plan, which I'm hoping people will have seen already. So I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Phillip. Members, any questions? Councillor Lyon.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just one point, which is about the sensitivity of this budget and how strong it is in terms of going forward for the full year. I know that's probably an unknown, but is there any way we can probably reduce our commitment or risk?
I think it's a known unknown, Councillor Lyon, actually. If we still had Bob Palmer here, maybe he would lend me his crystal ball and that would give us a better bet of where we're going to be. On the other hand, if Councillor Lyon would like to tell me what the inflation rate is going to be next September, then I would have a better option than that. What we have to do is work on the basis of what we know. It's not an exact science. We will get to as good a view as we can. I think the key part is, with the work that we have done on budget savings through this year, there's much more focus on what the cost of doing things is. We're not in a mode, we're not a council these days that takes the view that the budget is there, we'll spend it. What we take forward is a view, and this goes throughout the council businesses, looking at things, deciding whether we need to do them, whether we're getting value for money. If there are significant changes, then things will come back. And in general, I would say our officers, and this is called out, and I would definitely want to put forward a real thanks to all the officers who put a lot of work into this. They've got a much better focus now on seeing where the costs are and looking at what costs can be minimised going forward. As long as we keep that laser focus on this, as we would in the private sector, then I think we have a very good chance of staying at least overall close to the budget. I expect, as always, there will be bits that are up and bits that are down.
Thank you. Any other members? Councillor Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chairman. I mean, as it's coming to scrutiny, I'll save some of the more detailed stuff from there. But there's one quite large figure I just wanted to clarify. The reduction of £200,000 in parking income at Bakers Lane, Epping, and the line the council has put is that we have the same number of parking spaces after the closure of Bakers Lane as before, albeit in a different place. So I don't see it logically follows that because the car park's being closed, there's a diminution of that size in income. It'd just be helpful if someone could clarify the figures. I mean, I know, there's been sort of questioned about whether, the actual number is the same, but if someone could explain the figures, that'd be helpful.
Councillor Phillip.
Happy to do that. The Bakers Lane car park, when it transfers, will not be part of our estate. We sold Cottage Lane to Qualis. That then becomes theirs. Bakers Lane, when it closes to allow the construction of the new sports centre. Will not have any car parking on it, therefore there will be no income coming from Baker's Lane. We will not own those 2 car parks in Epping.
Thank you. Any other members? In that case, can I thank Councillor Phillip for his report and all the hard work that's gone into it by all Cabinet colleagues and, of course, all officers. Probably in my 24 years on this council, this has been the most tense budget period, I think I can say, from even when we had a series of double-digit council tax increases before we were in administration. So it's certainly probably one of the most difficult budget rounds I've ever known. It's been dealt with very professionally, a line-by-line analysis of everybody's budgets to find £4.2 million worth of savings, which is no mean feat for a council our size. And there are many councils up and down the country who would like to be in our position as we look at this first iteration of the budget before it goes through a strong governance process of going to a select panel where members will be able to have further input and say on what's been decided. And I think that's really important. And I ask all members of the relevant select panel to be present that evening. And of course, all Cabinet members will be there to answer questions on their portfolios. Councillor Phillip is quite correct to say when he stood up last year to give his budget speech, of course, inflation stood at 5.2%, and this year, at its darkest days, has been over 11%. Who knows where it will end up in the future? Of course, in a post-pandemic world, as a district council, we've been very reliant upon our income from car parks and such, and I think Councillor Whitehouse made a point about car parking. Well, of course, car parking fees across the district have fallen and haven't recovered to their pre-pandemic levels at this stage. And of course, that puts us under even more pressure for our revenue streams. And then, of course, on top of that, with the challenges of inflation, we don't know yet how that will impact upon our contracts. You've heard tonight how one tender has come back with only one bidder, and that's happening across the board. And indeed, I'm hearing cases where tenders are coming back well over what's anticipated, particularly in the construction industry. So we still have a long way to go. And I know Councillor Phillip will say very clearly as we come through the budget process, this isn't just about 23-24. It's much more about the medium-term strategy that we adopt and making sure that we, as a council, we stay financially sound. We've always been proud since 2005 of this council for being on a sound financial footing, and we will continue to do that. But in order to do that, you have to take the tough decisions, which we have done with this budget and we will continue to do in the future, because at the end of the day, this council is very much about protecting frontline services whilst delivering a low council tax authority, and we will continue to achieve that as we move forward. Members, you've got the recommendations before you this evening. They need to be agreed before this can go forward to the next stage. Can I take it that those are agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much.
Chairman, can I ask you to confirm, will it be going to the 24th of January Stronger Council Select Committee?
Councillor Phillip, do you know that's the date? Yeah. Councillor Murray, we will make sure that's confirmed for you. I believe you're correct. Okay, under any other business, I do need just to confirm that obviously, as you heard previously, that we are looking at setting up a trust for the future of the museum. And I do need to confirm the appointment of 2 trustees this evening, Councillor Helen Kane and Councillor Holly Whitbread, in order that we can progress that further in the coming year. Members of the Cabinet, can I agree that, please? Thank you very much. Okay, with that, there's no any other business, any other business. There's no need to go exclude public and press. I therefore close the meeting. Thank you very much, and a happy Christmas to all present.